I want you to imagine for a second being the person that Hammer Films calls when Christopher Lee decides he doesn't want to play Dracula anymore. Because that's what happened to John Forbes-Robertson in 1974. John Forbes-Robertson was born in 1928 in Worthing, West Sussex. He was born into an acting family. His great-uncle was the famous actor-manager Johnston Forbes-Robertson, and his mother was a leading lady for a touring troupe. John spent most of his childhood in the home of his grandparents, where at an early age he made his stage debut at the Intimate Theatre in Palmer's Green. Throughout the 50s and 60s, he worked as a character actor in British television, taking on roles in The Saint, Poldark, and The New Avengers. Most frequently, he was cast in roles as doctors and police officers, where his tall, thin frame lent him an air of authority. He would continue throughout the 70s and 80s, acting in horror movies and thrillers, as well as guesting on shows like Crime Traveler and Scarecrow and Mrs. King. He can also be seen in the role of the Minister in 1985's Life Force, a cult classic space vampire flick. After the 1980s, Forbes-Robertson largely withdrew from film and television, taking on only the occasional role. He spent the rest of his life living in Hanwell, West London, where he indulged in his favorite hobbies of sailing and browsing the antiques market of Portobello Road.
I need your mortal coil. I need the form of your miserable carcass. I need your vile image. I need to walk this earth again, freed from these walls, freed from this mausoleum.
In 1970, Hammer was developing the film Scars of Dracula. They had barely managed to talk Christopher Lee into returning for the previous movie, Taste the Blood of Dracula, so they began development on Scars as a potential reboot for the series with a different actor in the role. They discussed the possibility with John Forbes-Robertson, but at the last minute, Christopher Lee decided that, despite his misgivings about the series, he would return to the lead role. Forbes-Robertson, however, would be given the role of the mysterious Man in Black in Hammer's production of The Vampire Lovers in that same year. Lee would return twice more to play Dracula, in Dracula AD 1972 and in The Satanic Rites of Dracula, before he called it quits. With the last couple of entries in their Dracula franchise netting largely negative reviews and gradually diminishing box office returns, Hammer decided to enter into a partnership with Hong Kong production company Shaw Brothers Studio. The idea to combine Hammer horror with Hong Kong martial arts would serve to shake up the stagnating franchise and, at the same time, secured them much-needed funding as Shaw Brothers agreed to foot 50% of the production budget. The role of Dracula was offered to Lee, but he read the script and declined, and Hammer turned once more to John Forbes-Robertson to fill his shoes. The primary production began on October 22nd in Hong Kong, with mountain scenes to be shot on the nearby Kowloon Peak. Roy Ward Baker, who had directed both The Vampire Lovers and Scars of Dracula, among other titles, directed the shoots. The Shaws, however, were dissatisfied with Baker's work and set up a second production unit to film additional action scenes under the uncredited direction of one of their favorite collaborators, Chang Che. When production was finished, The Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires was released across Asia with a runtime of 110 minutes. Hammer, however, was not impressed with the additional material filmed by the man who is frequently called the godfather of Chinese cinema, and cut most of the additional action scenes from the European edit of the film. The film would be edited even further for American release, including an initial edit that removed the character of Dracula from the movie entirely. But upon realizing the running time was too short, John Forbes-Robertson's scenes were reinstated to the film.
Behold, Van Helsing. Look on me now.
I wish I could tell you a lot about John Forbes-Robertson's performance as Dracula, but it's primarily notable for two reasons. The first is that it's the only time a Hammer film would feature any actor other than Christopher Lee in the role of Dracula. And the second is that Dracula was very clearly written into the story in such a way as to inconvenience Christopher Lee as little as possible, acting under thick makeup as if that would hide the fact that this was a completely different actor than the last 8 movies. Forbes-Robertson isn't given much to do except stand around and snarl. He's practically written out of the film after the first scene, as Dracula takes on the body of Ka, played by Five Fingers of Death and the 36th Chamber of Shaolin star Chen Chan, and then spends the majority of the movie not being Dracula. He does reemerge toward the end of the film, but by that point it's a little too late to establish any unique characteristics to set himself apart as anything other than a placeholder for a studio who had actually been counting on another actor agreeing to take the role. The release of The Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires was a financial disaster for Hammer, quashing their hopes for a Bollywood partnership to produce a sequel tentatively entitled Kali, Devil Bride of Dracula, which is a shame because I would absolutely love to have seen that happen. Not only was that sequel killed, but also any and all sequels for the Dracula franchise. The same year, Hammer would release Captain Kronos, Vampire Hunter, which was intended to launch a swashbuckling, action-packed phase of the studio's development. But with that movie failing to gain traction as well, Hammer would wind up closing its doors and canceling all of their intended slate. More recently, however, both of these films have found some cult success. Kronos as a film that was ahead of its time, and Seven Golden Vampires as a fatally flawed, but still fascinating experiment. Have you seen The Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires? If so, what's your take on this Hammer horror meets martial arts flick? Drop down into the comments below to let me know what you think. While you're there, make sure if you haven't already to click the like and subscribe buttons that are down there. You can also share this video with the other Dracula fans in your life. Or perhaps your unlife, I'm not judging. Until next time, I am Glenn Williams, the film optimist, reminding you to watch like it means something.